I was planning a trip with my in-laws and decided to call my son, Anthony, to see if he had any plans. "I'm going to practice," he said. "You all should go and have fun. Isn't this trip a bit unusual?" "Are you okay, Mom?" Anthony asked. "I'll manage. I'll bring you back a souvenir. Work hard at your practice," I replied. My son, Anson, has always loved running marathons, just like me. He even got a college scholarship for it. Even though his college is nearby, he lives in the dorms to save commuting time and only comes home during long holidays. I knew he couldn't join us on the trip, but I wanted to ask anyway. His answer was just what I expected. "My name is Flora. I'm 46 years old and work full-time. My husband, Steve, is 4 years older than me and used to be my boss. He's a capable man, and I respect him. After we got married and had our son, we were a happy family. But over time, our relationship started having problems. The main reason was my husband's parents, especially his mom, who didn't like me from the beginning and often bullied me. At first, Steve defended me because we lived far from his parents, so we didn't see them often. But when Anson wanted to attend a high school near my mom's house because of his love for marathoning, things changed. I was the one who got him into running since I used to run marathons and still do sometimes. I was happy he enjoyed running like me, so I convinced Steve to move closer to the high school Anson wanted to attend. Steve applied for a transfer at work so we could move, and Anson got into a good university because of his high school, so it worked out well. The day before our trip, Steve said, "Go get the rental car tomorrow morning and pick up my parents on your way back." I was confused and asked, "Why am I the one renting the car?" "What are you going to do?" "I'm exhausted from work, so I'll sleep until the last minute. Once you pick up my parents, come back and I'll drive from there. It's on the way to where we're going anyway," Steve explained. I understood his reasoning, but I was also very tired. Even though we both worked similar hours, I did all the house chores. When I thought about it, we used to share chores equally. But since moving closer to his parents, they started visiting often, and the balance shifted. Whenever his mom saw Steve doing chores, she strongly disapproved. "Housework is the wife's job. The breadwinner shouldn't do it. Isn't that right, Flora?" Steve's mom would say, giving me a stern look, and I would nod in agreement. This kept happening until Steve stopped doing any chores at all. While it was partly Steve's fault, I felt his mom influenced him a lot. Steve even started repeating what his mom would say, agreeing with her views. I am sometimes the breadwinner in our family, but it felt pointless to try to fix things, and I didn't have the energy to even try. Steve had changed a lot in the past few years. His work performance seemed to be getting worse, and he often took out his frustrations on me. I realized that arguing back only caused more problems, so I decided to just accept the situation. It seemed like the least stressful way to live. I thought about divorce sometimes, but I worried it might hurt our son's chances of getting into college if we became a single-parent family. So I put that idea aside. Instead, I started thinking of my husband more like a pet than a person, which surprisingly made me feel less stressed. Eventually, I realized that getting a divorce wasn't worth the effort, and that's how I ended up where I am today. I agreed to this trip because it was to a resort I really loved. I knew I could have a great time even if I ended up doing things alone. Honestly, I was ready to do separate activities from my in-laws and husband if necessary. Maybe they invited me mainly to drive, but since both my husband and father-in-law could drive, I figured it would be fine. I played along with the idea that our spoiled dog was being demanding again. My husband asked me to pick up the rental car, so I went to my in-laws' house. "Flora, you're late. Is this the car for today? You should have rented a bigger one," my mother-in-law said. "Well, it's better than your tiny car, at least," I replied. "The car we usually use is one I bought myself, even for commuting to work. I assumed I'd be its main user since I paid for it. We don't often travel out of town, so I thought a small car would be enough. Plus, I loved its interior design and color, so I bought it. My husband would use it without asking and show his parents around in it. My mother-in-law criticized the car's size and acted like I could only afford a small car. I suggested we use my father-in-law's car for the trip, but he didn't want others driving it and didn't want to do all the driving himself. So we rented a car, but I wasn't consulted about this. I found out that I'd have to pick up the rental car and drive it while they sat comfortably in the back seat. It made me want to tell them to arrange their own transportation. I was really tired. In the end, even though my husband said he'd help with the driving, he slept through the entire trip. My father-in-law refused to drive unless it was his car, leaving me to drive the whole way while my husband napped in the passenger seat. My father-in-law constantly criticized my driving, giving me suggestions too late or questioning my decisions at traffic lights. It was just added stress. My mother-in-law joined in, criticizing my driving too. I found it annoying to be critiqued by someone who couldn't drive herself, especially since my father-in-law had been in many accidents and should have given up his license. My mother-in-law insisted he was just unlucky and a good driver. I didn't want him to drive me around anyway. I didn't mind driving, but I wished he would stop interfering. When we arrived at the resort, my husband finally woke up, tired from a day in the car. We followed my in-laws' suggestion to relax at the hotel instead of doing any activities outside. I enjoyed the chance to unwind, swimming in the pool and exploring the hotel grounds. It was a nice way to spend the day after a delicious dinner and a relaxing spa visit. I returned to our room to find my husband already asleep. I wasn't sure what my in-laws were doing next door, but they were probably asleep too. I went to bed, and when I woke up to the fresh morning air, my husband was still asleep. With some time before breakfast, I decided to take a walk. But when I returned, I found an unbelievable sight. My husband was gone, and his things were missing too. I frantically searched the room and tried to contact my in-laws next door, but there was no answer. At the front desk, I learned they had already eaten breakfast an hour earlier than I was told. It seemed they had left me behind. I also had to pay for the hotel checkout by myself. Was my mother-in-law's offer to pay for our stay just a trick? With no other choice, I paid for both rooms and left the hotel, only to find there was no car waiting for me. While I was thinking about what to do next, my phone rang. It was my mother-in-law. Where are you now?" I asked, confused about the situation. My mother-in-law chuckled in response, "Just enjoying some quality family time since we're on vacation." "I see, but why didn't you all just leave together from the beginning instead of leaving me behind?" I couldn't help but ask. "Wow, Flora, you did express interest in joining us, didn't you?" "That's why we decided to bring you along," she replied casually. I remembered mentioning that I wanted to visit this resort while watching TV with my husband. Was that what he remembered? Normally, it would be sweet if he remembered my casual comments, but this time it felt like he used it to annoy me. Besides, I was the one who did most of the driving to get here. Why should I be reminded that I was brought here by my mother-in-law, who neither drove nor contributed any money? Beyond anger, all I could do was sigh. "Fine then, let's go sightseeing as a family and head home afterward," I suggested. "You can do some sightseeing too, Flora, and then come back. We're not sure how you'll get back, but you're good at marathons, aren't you? Just run back." My mother-in-law taunted, her laughter making me more frustrated. "If Steve is driving, put me on speakerphone so he can hear me," I demanded, my anger boiling over. As soon as I made the request, it seemed my mother-in-law transferred the call, and my husband's voice came on the line. "Good morning. You were eager to come here, weren't you? Take it easy today, but remember we have laundry from the trip to tackle. Make sure it's washed by tomorrow morning," he said cheerfully. But any warmth I once felt for him had disappeared. "Do your own laundry," I replied sharply. "Hey, that's not a nice way to speak. As the breadwinner, I'm advising you to relax today. You should be thanking me," he replied. "Oh, the breadwinner? Don't worry, this will be the last time we see each other since you've mostly just seen me when you're asleep," I said, making it clear that I was serious. "What do you mean?" he asked, clearly puzzled. "We need to head back home today. There's laundry and house cleaning waiting for us," my husband declared. "Yeah, that's exactly why I'm not going back," I responded firmly. "What do you mean?" His voice quivered with uncertainty. "I'm filing for divorce. Remember 6 months ago when you told me you met your soulmate, your childhood friend, and you were planning to marry her? The one who moved back to your hometown after her divorce?" I reminded him, feeling the surge of emotion. About 6 months ago, I sensed something was wrong and confronted my husband. He confessed he had reconnected with his childhood friend and believed she was his true love. He wanted to divorce me and marry her to support her and her child as a single mother. He even gave me pre-filled divorce papers, but I couldn't bring myself to end our marriage. We didn't speak for days until he realized he needed my help with household chores. Eventually, he asked me to forget what he said, but I couldn't, so I started gathering evidence of his cheating. I wondered if Steve had planned this trip to try to win me over. This conversation happened about 3 months ago, shortly after I quit my job. As I shared my thoughts, I could hear the surprise in my in-laws' voices on the other end of the speakerphone. It seemed this was the first time they were hearing about their son's resignation. "I remember when you said you were leaving your job. I was worried about you finding a new one and disagreed with your reasons, didn't I?" I continued, recalling the exchange. "You were confident and assured me you'd find a new job quickly. Yet here we are, and you've only managed to secure a part-time position. I can't help but wonder when you'll find something more stable." As Steve remained silent while driving, I took the chance to share my thoughts. "I've been imagining you as a dog to cope with the stress, but then I realized I might as well get a real one," I said firmly. "So I'll be filing the divorce papers. Enjoy your family vacation." My in-laws were shocked, and my husband tried to say something, but I hung up the call without a second thought. I decided to enjoy sightseeing before heading home, and I explained the situation to my son over the phone. His response was simple. "I told you so." While his reaction was expected, it felt a bit lighter than I anticipated, given that he already knew what was going on. When I returned from the trip, I didn't go back home. Instead, I put my sons and my belongings in a self-storage unit, just in case. With only the essentials, I went to a real estate agency. The sales representative, who I had become friendly with and shared drinks with a few times, greeted me warmly. She was from my generation, so she was easy to talk to. Over drinks, I had told her about my husband and in-laws and asked her to let me know if any properties became available. That day, I signed a contract for my own place. Having a new home made me feel relieved, and I went to the city hall to submit the divorce papers, which went through without any problems. Finally, I returned the many calls my ex-husband had made. "Hello," I began, keeping my voice steady. "The divorce papers have been accepted. We are now officially strangers." My husband's panicked voice came through the phone. "Are you serious about the divorce?" I ended things with her. "It's just you now. You didn't like me looking at other women, right? Well, now I'm only focused on you. Please come back without any worries." But his words only made me feel disgusted. "What are you talking about? I never tried to please you in the first place. And you didn't end things with her, did you? You were dumped because you couldn't find a job and had no money, right?" It turned out my husband's mistress was acquainted with the sales representative who helped me find my new place. What a small world. She had listened to my husband's mistress's complaints about him, saying she was his current girlfriend. Apparently, after he quit his job and started working part-time, she saw no reason to stay with him and ended things. But a fling is just a fling. I'll definitely be seeking compensation. That's correct. Even though they split up now, he still cheated, and there's evidence. Compensation. I already told you, we broke up. It's just you now. I could only let out a sigh. "So, you're saying that now you're single, you're considering another affair. I don't care what you do, but I'm done being taken advantage of. You didn't even notice your things were missing from the house because you didn't care, did you? I'm not coming back, so throw away whatever you don't need." With that, I ended the call. Even after this, my ex-husband kept calling me, and my former in-laws reached out too. But I have no intention of going back to that house. My ex-husband still hasn't found a job, can't afford the rent, and has moved back in with his parents. Meanwhile, my ex-father-in-law continues to drive recklessly and recently crashed into a neighbor's fence with my ex-mother-in-law in the car. Thankfully, no one was injured, but they didn't have property insurance and had to borrow money to cover the repair costs. All of this was detailed in an email my ex-husband kept sending me. I find his misfortune somewhat amusing. While I don't respond, I haven't blocked his emails either, quietly enjoying the spectacle. After moving to a pet-friendly property, I got a small dog and found that I enjoyed caring for a pet more than I did for people. My son, worried about me being alone, has started visiting on weekends, a change from only coming during long holidays. Each day now feels fulfilling. Maybe this weekend I'll visit that resort town again for the first time in a while.